Welcome everyone. How are you all doing tonight?
Good.
My name is Andrea Hadsall. I'm the education manager here at the History Center, and we are so happy to see you this evening. I'd like to give a special thank you to any of those in the audience that are members of the History Center, because they support us throughout the year to make sure that we are able to do the high caliber programs and exhibits like partnerships with Resilience Productions all throughout the year. So without their support, we wouldn't be able to do things like this. But here's my favorite part. So I get to have the wonderful opportunity to introduce Resilience Productions. Now I see many familiar faces, but for those that are new, Resilience Productions is conceived and created by Danielle Bruce, Gladys Devane, and Liz Mitchell, who believe in the power of storytelling. And they're pretty good at it too. All right. So as an ensemble, they research and they write and produce shows that are inspired by actual historical events, and they produce them in forms of plays, poetry, and staged readings. The mission of Resilience is to educate and enlighten the public, particularly regarding stories of the uncelebrated contributions of African Americans in our community, in our state, and ultimately our nation. Tonight, Resilience Productions presents Remarkable Women, Righting the Wrongs, directed by Danielle Bruce and written by Gladys Devane in collaboration with Danielle Bruce. After this evening's performance, we'll have a quick reception for about 10-15 minutes, and then we are actually inviting our cast to return to the stage for a talk back. So if you have questions, start thinking of them now. If not, I've got some backups. But at this moment, I invite you, please turn off all of your cell phones, buzzers, pagers, noisemakers. We are filming this evening, so we also ask that you refrain from any photography, texting, or video recording during tonight's performance. You know, good theater etiquette. Now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy Remarkable Women, Righting the Wrongs.
Tonight we invite you to travel with us to a time and place where history is reimagined and where three incredible women's lives intersect, and they learn that with the power of the pen come consequences. The year is 1892, 27 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, in an era known as post-Reconstruction. Blacks throughout the country are being subjected to egregious injustices, and laws are being legislated to disenfranchise and suppress them in every conceivable way. We are three Black women, each on a journey to right the wrongs of society,
to turn the light of truth upon the wrongdoers, and to hold this nation accountable to its promise of a more perfect union. January 1892, well-known and well-respected writer Frances Harper has just published her second novel, Iola Leroy. However, it is her lesser-known poem, A Brighter Day of Fairer Morn, that should not be overlooked. It was written in direct response to ex-Confederate soldier Maurice Thompson's poem, A Voodoo Prophecy. Both poems were published in the New York Independent newspaper, and while Thompson's perpetuated the myth of the Negro man as being a savage beast and a threat to the white race, Harper's dispelled that myth and encouraged young colored women to believe in the power of the pen.
Lillian Thomas is a journalist who recently took a position as the first woman on staff at the Indianapolis Freeman newspaper, writing for Mr. George Knox. Compelled by public speaking and the power of the written word, her first assignment is to interview me, Ida B. Wells, on my latest compilation of research, Southern Horrors, Lynch Laws in All Its Phases.
Writer, controversial figure, and owner of the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight newspaper, Ida B. Wells is known for publishing articles in her paper that question and contradict the unchecked biases of the white press. Today, she is arriving in Indianapolis to be interviewed by Lillian Thomas before returning home to Memphis. Dear Mr. Majors, I hope this letter finds you well. At your request, enclosed is my poetry in response to Mr. Maurice Thompson's poem, The Voodoo Prophecy. I have titled my poem, A Brighter Day, A Fairer Morn, which I think is most appropriate. I must note, however, Mr. Thompson's poem is quite lengthy and written in an arcane form. Thus, I have chosen to not respond to each line, but to respond thematically, as the spirit moves me. I do hope this is suitable to you. Thank you for entrusting me with this task. Sincerely, Frances Harper.
Oh my goodness, she's here. Good afternoon, Miss Wells. Please do come in.
Thank you. What a pleasure it is to meet you.
I am so pleased to meet you. Mr. Knox and I are so grateful to you for agreeing to this interview. How lucky we are that you could accommodate us.
Yes.
How were your travels? You must be exhausted.
I must admit I am a little tired. The train ride was long, but it wasn't terribly unpleasant. The noise and smoke in the car was not conducive to writing, so I spent most of my time reading and was able to finish this. Are you familiar with Frances Harper?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm quite familiar with Mrs. Harper's work, but I haven't read this yet.
It's very interesting, but what's more interesting is her most recent article published in the New York Independent. It's her response to this despicable poem written by an ex-Confederate soldier a couple months ago. Have you not read it?
No, I haven't. My move to Indianapolis and my new job has been a little bit more challenging than I had anticipated. And being the first and only woman on the staff, the pressure's been unimaginable.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, here it is. Now, you can't read this until after you've read the Voodoo Prophecy, otherwise it won't make sense. That Maurice Thompson is downright nasty, but Frances Harper's response is genius.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do and will enjoy reading this. Please have a seat. Can I offer you some tea?
Yes, thank you. You
said you were a bit tired. Would you like to take a minute to catch your breath, to freshen up? I do apologize for my lack of civility.
No apology necessary. I am here for an interview. And being a journalist myself, I do understand time constraints, deadlines, and, well, how they push us. Shall we begin?
Well, let me say first, thank you again. And you should know that our paper, the Indianapolis Freeman, has published several of your speeches and editorials in our paper. You have quite a following among our readers.
Well, that's nice to hear. Some of our Negro leaders, the men, have described me as strident, harsh, and abrasive.
Miss Wells, it seems to me you understand that the battle you are fighting, it will not be won with kind words or gentle demeanor. That often truth like acid eats at the conscience of the nation, removing corrosion and exposing our true nature. The research you're doing is shining light into the darkest corners of society. Truth is your acid. And it will burn.
Well, you certainly are right, aren't you? I appreciate your sentiment. However, sometimes it feels as if I'm being attacked on all sides. It gets difficult to separate friend from foe.
I can only imagine how difficult things are for you, simultaneously waging battles on several fronts. Oh. But given all that you're involved in, where are you focusing your energy at this moment in time?
As you know, lynching and mob violence are always at the top of my list, but at this present moment, are you familiar with the upcoming Chicago World's Fair?
Oh, yes, of course. Isn't everyone? That fair is being billed as the most spectacular event in this country's history.
You're absolutely correct. It is slated to bring 46 different countries, and America's exceptionalism will be put on display. Now, the dedication ceremony is supposed to happen in 3 months, and the fair is slated to open next May. As of yet, not a single Negro exhibit has been included.
What's being done to address this?
Unfortunately, it's out of my hands. But I've been assured that the planning committee has been told that nothing would evidence the progress of colored people more than our own exhibit. An exhibit of products, of skills, and of industry created by the colored race since the emancipation. As expected, the national directors gave a resounding no to that proposition, but they haven't heard the last of this.
So in other words, there will be no unified statement about colored America? Is there anything that you can do to change their minds?
There is no change in the minds. The minds are made up. But I'm putting together a little surprise. I can assure you, this exclusion will not go unnoticed.
Why do I feel like a surprise? It's something I don't want to get from you. Well, anyway, as for your research on mob violence and lynching, many others have been speaking out against mob violence for quite some time. But presently, your voice dominates this conversation, and the vigor and urgency with which you speak seem to suggest that there is a personal issue.
Yes. It became personal with the lynching at the curve. Those men were my friends. Henry Moss was more than a friend. I considered him family. I am the godmother to his firstborn, Maureen. That lynching was not about what it was purported to be about. When a colored person is lynched, it is seldom about what is reported.
According to recounts that I've read, a colored mob shot a deputy for no reason.
That's what people were told by the white press, but that's not true. People were told that 2 lawmen and a civilian were shot in cold blood without provocation by a colored mob led by these men. They were also told by the white press that the men lynched were co-conspirators in a plan to massacre white people, and that's an outright lie.
Was there a shooting?
Yes, there was a shooting, and there was a conspiracy, but it was a white man's conspiracy. Here's what really happened. My friend Henry Moss opened People's Grocery in a neighborhood nicknamed The Curve. Now, already across the street, there already existed Barrett's grocery store, owned by a white man, William Barrett.
So you have People's Grocery owned by a colored man across the street from Barrett owned by a white man.
Yes, that's right. Now, Barrett was reportedly disreputable and engaged in all kinds of illegal activities. And in time, the two stores became highly competitive. With People's Grocery, the colored store, more and more became the store of preference for many in the community.
In other words, Barrett was losing his monopoly.
That's right. And this formed an obvious form of contingency between People's and Barrett's. It all started on March 2nd when a little colored boy, Armour, and a white boy, Cornelius, were playing a game of marbles in front of People's Grocery. The two got into an argument and a fight ensued. When the colored boy began to get the upper hand in the fight, the white boy's father, Mr. Hurst, jumped in and started beating on the little colored boy. 2 employees from People's Grocery saw this white man beating on little Armour, so they rushed outside to stop him. The commotion caused a crowd to form, and the scene quickly became racially charged with lots of yelling, name-calling, cursing. During the fray, Mr. Barrett was reportedly clubbed by William Stewart. Now, it was quite a commotion, but the crowd was eventually dispersed.
Was anyone hurt?
No, no one was hurt. But the following day, Mr. Barrett brought the sheriff's deputy over to People's Grocery Store to find the man he accused of hitting him. Mr. McDowell told him that the man he was looking for was not there. Mr. Barrett started cursing and yelling and said, "You niggas ain't nothing but thieves." And then he hit Mr. McDowell with his pistol. As the two tussled, the pistol was dropped and Mr. McDowell grabbed the pistol and fired a shot at Mr. Barrett as he was running away. Now, he didn't hit him, but later, Mr. McDowell was arrested.
So that was the mob violence that led to this lynching?
No. On March 4th, a warrant was issued for Armour, the colored boy.
But he was only a child.
Yes, I know. We all know. A warrant was also issued for William Stewart, the man accused of hitting Mr. Barrett. The issuing of these warrants caused the colored community to call a meeting in order to prepare to defend themselves. Mr. Barrett went to the authorities and told them that the black folks were having a meeting. He said the colored community was conspiring to do violence against the white community. My friend Henry Moss, the owned People's Grocery, he knew his troubles had just begun. He knew they would be back. Sure enough, 2 days later, 6 white men and a sheriff's deputy, all in plain clothes, all carrying guns and rifles, showed up to People's Grocery, but this time, the employees were ready for them and they defended themselves. Bullets rained down like manna from heaven, and the deputy was shot and another mob member was injured, but nobody was killed.
So, but I bet their pride was bruised.
You're right. And then immediately, hundreds of white men were deputized to put down what the local paper called an armed rebellion by black men in Memphis.
An armed rebellion
That's
by
what they
black
call it.
men.
My friend Henry Moss and his 2 employees, Calvin McDowell and William Stewart, were were named as co-conspirators, which was an outright lie. But the three were arrested and put in the Shelby County Jail pending trial.
There
But
was no
of course,
trial.
there was no trial. 4 days later, on March 9th, approximately 2:30 a.m., 75 white men in mass stormed the Shelby County Jail. Well, allegedly stormed the jail. We both know they walked right in, grabbed Moss, McDowell, and Stewart, and took them out of the city 1 mile north of the rail yard where they were shot dead. But not before shooting off their fingers. Other body parts. The local paper printed the lynching and all the gruesome details. The paper also reported that my friend Henry told the mob, "Tell my people to go west. There's no justice here." Those were his final words.
And the paper printed them. The gall. But why?
They want us to go. They want us to leave everything we've worked so hard for. After the lynching, they looted and vandalized people's grocery store and just completely destroyed it. Maybe it is time for us to leave. They murder us in cold blood. Yes, maybe we should leave.
You aren't suggesting that all colored people go north, are you?
Maybe I am. Henry Moss was like family. He was a community leader. He was becoming too strong, too independent, and he killed him for it.
I don't mean any disrespect, Miss Wells. But do you ever fear for your safety? You know, given who your colleagues and your friends are and what you write about?
Usually, I'm not afraid. Usually. I don't think about it much. However, after Henry's murder and the lynching at the curve, plus, I'm certain my most recent article about the Offutt incident did nothing to ensure my safety.
The Offutt incident?
It touched a nerve with fragile Southern white men, and I've been told to tread lightly.
Well, and what happened with the Offutt accident?
You remember William Offutt, the Ohio colored man accused of raping a white woman?
I seem to recall that case, but I don't remember the details.
William Offutt was accused of raping Julia Underwood, the white woman and the wife of Reverend Isaac Underwood. Julia Underwood accused Mr. Offutt of drugging her with chloroform and raping her. Mr. Offutt denied the rape charge, but he did admit to going to Mrs. Underwood's house at her invitation. And he did admit to being intimate with her at her request. But he vehemently denied raping her. Nonetheless, on December 14th, 1888, he was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years. Well, then, 4 years later, after the torment became too much to bear, Mrs. Underwood told her husband that what she had told him and what she had said in court was a lie, and that William Offutt was innocent. She told her husband,
"I alone am guilty, while you were away on a business trip, I met Mr. Offutt one day at the post office. It was raining and I was carrying several large bundles, and he offered to assist me. So I allowed him to walk me home carrying the bundles. I could tell Mr. Offutt was fascinated with me, so I invited him in. We talked. He was quite nice and respectful, so I invited him to call on me, and he did on many occasions, at my invitation. He often brought treats for the children, candy and chestnuts, and I would use the treats to bribe the children to leave the room. We became intimate many times. I never resisted. I had no desire to resist. The reason I said he raped me was because I thought one of the neighbors saw him come into the house, and I panicked. I was terrified. I was afraid I might have contracted a loathsome disease. And I feared I might give birth to a colored baby. It was to save my reputation that I told you a deliberate lie. I just hope you can forgive me, Isaac. As a Christian, as my husband. And I did the right thing telling you the truth. Surely you recognize that.
After learning the truth, Reverend Underwood, her husband, being a Christian and a man of the cloth, went to the police and told them what had happened. He then hired an influential Pittsburgh attorney to guarantee Mr. Offutt's release from jail and to clear his name. And then Reverend Underwood divorced his wife. Now that story broke January 16th of this year in the Cleveland Gazette with the headlines, "Horrible but true. An innocent African American sent to the penitentiary on a rape charge." Mr. Offutt has served 4 years for a crime he did not commit. I picked up that story and published it in my paper, along with a scathing commentary rebuking Southern white men for perpetuating the lie that colored men are rapists, and using that lie to justify my violence. It's just like that poem I gave you from the New York Independent, The Voodoo Prophecy, the one I gave you earlier. It is the perfect example of colored men being depicted as vicious savages. And who is the poem written by? A white man replete with guilt, who assumes the voice of a vengeful and savage colored man. Just look at how it begins. I am the prophet of the dusky race, the poet of wild Africa. Behold!
The midnight vision brooding in my face. Come near me and hear me, while from my lips the words of fate are told. A black and terrible memory masters me, the substance and shadow of deep wrong. You know the past. Hear now what is to be. From the midnight land, over sea and sand, from the green jungle, hear my voodoo song. Was I a heathen? I was, and still a fetish worshiper. But I was free to loiter and wander at my will, to leap and dance and hurl my lance and breathe the air of savage liberty. I hate you, and I live to nurse my hate. Remember when you plied the slaver's trade in my dear land. How patiently I wait the day, not far away, when all all your pride shall shrivel up and fade. And I shall set my seal upon your face, and I will mold you to the shape of my desire, and throw you through the cycle of all fear, and swing you, and wring you, and roast you in my passion's hottest fire.
This narrative has crept into the very fabric of our nation's dialogue. It degrades, dehumanizes, and vilifies the colored man.
Oh, yes. And this poem also exploits the Southern white man's fear of reprisals for all the sins he's committed against the colored race. And this is the perspective that has created the culture of mob violence.
You are absolutely correct. And you don't get so lucky as to have Francis Harper to the rescue with an eloquent rebuttal. But if someone had to speak on behalf of colored folks, I'm glad it was Francis Harper.
Now I have to know what she said. From the peaceful heights of a higher life,
I heard your maddening cry of strife. It quivered with anguish, wrath, and shame. Like a demon struggling with his chain. A chain of evil, heavy and strong, rusted with ages of fearful wrong, encrusted with blood and burning tears. The chain I had worn and dragged for years. It clasped my limbs, but it bound your heart and formed of your life a fearful part. You sold the wind but could not control the tempest wild of a guilty soul.
oh wow, this is masterfully written.
Keep reading, it gets better.
You thought of your fields and harvest white, where I toiled in pain from morn till night. You thought of the days you bought and sold the children I loved for paltry gold. You thought of our shrieks that rent the air, our moans of anguish and deep despair. With chattering teeth and paling face, you thought of your nation's deep disgrace. Nothing but vengeance, wrath, and hate, and the serpent's coils of an evil fate. A fate that shall crush and drag you down. A doom that shall press like an iron crown. The cross you have covered with sin and shame will bear aloft in Christ's holy name. Never again will its foes be furled, while sin and sorrow enshroud this world. Higher and better than hate for hate, like the scorpion fangs that desolate, is the hope of a brighter, fairer morn, and a peace and a love that shall yet be born, where the Negro shall hold an honored place, the friend and help of every race. His mission to build and not destroy, and to gladden the world with love
and joy. This is brilliant, full of grace and compassion.
Reading Francis inspires one to be more forgiving and compassionate.
Yes. Hello? Yes, this is Lillian Thomas. Yes. Yeah. Hello? Yes. Yes, I'm receiving a call from Mr. Knox. Hello, Mr. Knox. Oh, I'm well, sir. And you? Yes, she's here. We're in the midst of our interview. Yes. He would like to speak with you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Knox. My newspaper. Are you certain? How did you find this out? Everything. When did this happen? Do they know who's responsible? Is anyone hurt? Mr. Fleming. But he's safe and unharmed. Oh, thank God. Reverend Nightingale? But he no longer has ties to my paper. Why would they assault him? I appreciate your advice, Mr. Knox, but that may not be possible. Yes, I will. Yes, I will keep in touch. Thank you, Mr. Knox. A white mob ransacked my newspaper. Everything has been destroyed.
Oh, Ida, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?
Although every fiber in my being disagrees, I've been advised not to return home. So at this point, I don't know.
April 1893. My dear friend Lillian, I am eternally indebted to you for your kindness and generosity during my stay with you. The several days spent with you enabled me to clear my mind and develop a plan of action. As promised, I did not return to Memphis. Instead, I returned to Manhattan, where I presently reside with my dear friends Timothy and Carrie Fortune. I have secured a position as a journalist for the New York Age newspaper, where I will continue my work uninterrupted. And regarding the exclusion of the Negro exhibits in the Chicago World's Fair, I assured you that that exclusion would not go unnoticed, and indeed it hasn't. I met a brilliant attorney out of Chicago, and together we created a pamphlet entitled "The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition." It is my strongest desire that this information be printed in every colored newspaper in the country. As you so aptly stated, truth is my acid and it will burn. Sincerely, Ida.
Spring 1909. Dear Mrs. Harper, I am writing at this encouragement of Ida B. Wells, my friend and colleague for upwards of 17 years. As a journalist for the Indianapolis News, a white-owned newspaper, I write about matters that impact the Negro race. This paper enjoys a large circulation that includes both colored and white readers. Currently, I am working on an article entitled "The Power of the Pen, Negro Writers and Journalists," and I would like to interview you. I believe my readers will find your journey to becoming a gentle but powerful voice for justice uplifting and inspiring. Ida and I have shared many hours discussing your writings, and we both have been influenced by your eloquence and conviction. As Ida prepares to give her speech at the first annual conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, I pray she will reflect on your words and let them guide and ground her.
From the lynching record for a quarter of a century, I've concluded 3 salient facts. First, lynching is a color line murder. Second, crimes against women is the excuse, not the cause. And third, lynching is a national crime that requires a national remedy. Lynching is wholly political. Its purpose is to suppress the colored vote by intimidation, beating, shooting, and killing colored people. That purpose has been accomplished. The Negro vote has been suppressed, but mob murder continues. During the last 10 years, 1899 through 1908, there have been 959 lynchings in this country. Only 102 were white, and 857 were colored. Lynching is a color line murder.
To know Ida, even briefly, you will know that she has spent countless hours dedicated to the cause, and I believe she will make great social changes. I had the pleasure of interviewing Ida many years ago, and at that time, Ida gifted me with a copy of your novel, Iola Leroy. She also shared your rebuttal to Maurice Thompson's poem, The Voodoo Prophecy. Your response was not only brilliant, but it was written with grace and compassion. Your impressive body of works would be of great interest to our readers as your life and work are a testament to the power of the pen. As Ida speaks of the heinous crimes committed against our race, I hope she too will find compassion in a world so filled with hate and violence. Thank you for your consideration. With warmest regards, Lillian Thomas Fox.
Why is mob murder permitted by a Christian nation? What is the cause of this awful slaughter? This question is answered almost daily and always with the same shameless lie. Negroes are lynched to protect womanhood. Lynching is a blight upon our nation, mocking our laws and disgracing our Christianity. With malice toward none, but with charity for all. We must undertake the work of making the law of the land effective and supreme upon every foot of American soil. We must provide a shield to the innocent, and to the guilty, there must be punishment, swift and sure.
Dearest Ida, after 2 decades, I believe you have finally pried the door open to let the light shine in on the travesty of lynching and mob violence. You have awakened the nation to the all too common acts of lynching and mob violence inflicted upon the Negro race. Your research has left no room for doubt regarding the cause and effect, and we now know that federal laws are the only solution to this problem. You have garnered the support of a strong ally in your fight, and I may not live to see the fruits of your work, but I am sure with your continued efforts in support of the NAACP, that we will someday live in that nation envisioned by Abraham Lincoln when he said, with malice toward none, but with charity for all. May God bless and keep you. Your sister in Christ, Frances.
Tonight, we have only heard a portion of Ida B. Wells' pursuit for justice in her 1909 speech, This Awful Slaughter. But her mission to legislate laws against mob violence and lynching continued throughout her life. Unfortunately, Ida's heroic campaign wasn't finally realized until 2022. Yes, you heard me correctly. The first anti-lynching law was passed on March 29th, 2022. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was signed into law by President Joseph Biden, with none other than Michelle Duster, the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells, standing at his side. After 113 years, and still, if you can believe it, 8 House representatives chose to abstain from voting, not to vote on this act, and 3 actually voted no to the Anti-Lynching Act. And if you're wondering who they are, I happen to have their names right here. Andrew Clyde of Georgia, Thomas Massey, Kentucky, and Chip Roy of Texas. The 8 who chose to abstain from voting, which to me is a no vote: Michael Cloud from Texas, Michael Gallagher, Wisconsin, Paul Gosher, Arizona, Carol Miller, West Virginia, Mark Buchan, Wisconsin, Van Taylor, Texas, Randy Weber, Texas, and Lee Zeldin, New York. So today, we have a total of 11 congressional leaders who believe that lynching is okay in this great nation. Obviously, there's still work to be done and minds to change.
Lillian Thomas Fox remained in Indianapolis, where she cultivated a prolific career. She is known to be the first Black person in Indiana to write for a white paper. She became an influential public speaker and social activist, and she was involved in many women's clubs that were focused on social and political issues. And she established the Women's Improvement Club, opening outdoor camps to treat tuberculosis at a time when no facility would treat Black patients. These camps remained open for 13 years. Lillian Thomas Fox died in 1917 at the age of 62, and she is buried in Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis.
As for Ida B. Wells, she married attorney Ferdinand Barnett in 1895. After working with him 2 years, after working with him to establish a pamphlet regarding the absence of Negro exhibits at the Chicago World's Fair. She relocated in Chicago, where she raised a family of 6, but she continued her work in journalism and with the civil rights and women's movement. Ida B. Wells died in Chicago in 1931 at the age of 68, with too many honors and accolades to list.
Known as the Bronze Muse, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper created many numerous written works, from progressive novels to enlightened poetry to searing political speeches. As an influence and pioneer to the generations to come, Harper left an indelible mark on literature and culture. Frances Harper passed away in 1911 at age 85. Her funeral was held at the First Unitarian Universalist Church in Philadelphia.
So please feel free, grab a drink, grab a cookie. We'll have a talk back here in about 15 minutes. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us for our post-show talk back this evening. I'll be facilitating the discussion tonight, so I just ask for your patience as we try to get to everyone's questions. And before we get started, we wanted to make sure that we give special thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bloomington for their Racial Justice Task Force for sponsoring the 2023 Remarkable Women series by Resilience Productions. So without their support, hold on. There we go.
The engineer.
So thank you to the UU Church's Racial Justice Task Force for sponsoring this series, because without your support, Resilience Productions' Remarkable Women series would not be possible this year. Yay. So, to get things started, I would like to open it up to our cast here to introduce yourselves, and that way you all can learn everybody's true names, not their character names, to ask them questions.
My name is Annie Steiduhar.
Say that again.
I'm Steiduhar.
Do you see why I'm not saying the name?
Steiduhar. Ken Farrell.
Leah
Farrell.
McCrath Hinton. Liz Mitchell.
Gladys Devane.
Alrighty, so I'd like to open up the floor for
Don't they have to tell us their names?
We'll be here until 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. Yes, sir.
My name is Clarence Boo, and I'll start it off and
Thank
go
you.
around the room. To all of you, thank you for blessing us, opening our understanding. How do you get through your lives without getting emotional, is my question. Because it's so powerful and riveting as you tell this story, and you're impacting us all. I mean, I've learned so much just sitting here this evening. So how do you get through without getting caught up in the moment and getting emotional?
Well, I guess I'll start off. I did my crying early on, and not too long ago, I went to a workshop for historians from all over the country. And after going through rehearsals with this play and knowing what happened, the truth, and then hearing what was going on across the country, that was it was very difficult. That was a very difficult day. I found out from people who came from Memphis that they had just found the spot where these 3 men were murdered and were erecting a marker for them, and how you had to figure out how we're going to put a marker up that's not going to be destroyed, because in so many communities across America, they cut them down. They, you know, like they even did this one out here for the colored school. So that was a difficult day, and yes, it was difficult, but then you pushed through it, because it happens how often? Has it stopped?
Thank you.
Well, Leah gets me every night, just about when they go up to that rail yard. That's a killer. You know? That's a really moving piece, and she does an amazing job.
I guess I've passed all of the emotions about it because I do most of the writing. So I've read it and I've reread it and I've retweaked it, and you know, I've worked with the director to rewrite it, and so by the time we get to the stage, it's been done 1,000,000 times, and so I think I can just live with the words.
Well, I want to compliment you because the time period is, we studied, least understood of any in our history, I think, after the war, after the Civil War. And we gave up, we lost the opportunity with the 40 acres and a mule to put blacks into a place where they could be successful right after the war because of Johnson's presidency. But, you know, the current topic is reparations for blacks who came from slave families. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. You know, the fairness, how would it work, and who would get it, and all that sort of thing. Lots of questions, but do you have a reaction to that?
My reaction to reparation is long overdue. Should have been done a long time ago.
I say that 40 acres to mule should have been,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
should have
and
been done
that was
then.
not reparation enough.
Correct.
And that was not given.
Well, and they had so many, the government owned so many acres of land that it would not have cost, it was not a stretch to do that, but it was politics, pure and
Yeah,
simple.
yeah.
I'll take my 40 acres and a John Deere. Come on.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question more, Gladys, for you, sort of the process, you know, as you're writing this. I mean, I know you do a lot of research, but, you know, it's sort of, how to put it, is, I mean, the words are not obviously exactly written down from, you know, you've connected people and on reimagined history. How does the process go? I mean, do you just do research and you're interested in one character and you think how it goes dramatically, or?
It depends on what character or characters we are dealing with. And when we started this project, I said to Danielle, our director, I said, I would like to bring these 3 characters to stage in a period of time where they can interact. We knew we would have to reimagine history because we didn't know, there is no record of them ever coming together. And so I must admit, what you saw tonight had gone through a long process, and a long process of working directly with the director, because the first script that was presented started with the interview. And after we talked, and she said, let's think about another way of putting this together. And so then we revisited, and we kept revisiting it until we felt that we had something that would be interesting and engaging and could give you the backstory that you needed in order to follow the story that we were doing. All of the letters were created, but there were no letters in the history. So all of the letters were created, and the interaction between the characters was created in order to drive the story.
No, I just am impressed that it's dramatic and there's a story, but it presents so much facts, but in a way that's accessible and interesting, and yeah, you do a great job.
For example, we knew we wanted to talk about the Kurds. We wanted to talk about that actual lynching. We knew we wanted to talk about the Offutt incident. We knew we wanted to give an excerpt from Ida's speech at the NAACP. So then the question became, how do we connect these in such a way that the audience can follow you and it will still be interesting and engaging? And I must admit, I did a lot of writing. The director is the one with the creativity to come up with, the fading in and out and how to use the letters in order to push the story forward. So it was really a team approach.
She's over
And
there.
she's over there, and I wish she would speak up.
She's just chilling. Okay, I have a question to, well, everyone kind of thinks in some. So, after the process of creating this show, from pen to stage, so everyone's involved and can think on it, what have you found doing this show has had a big impact? What have you learned after creating this show?
For me, it was more about Ida B. Wells and what a tough nut she was. And she had to be, especially during that time, because to kill black people, even a child, was okay here in America. And are we still killing children? I mean, the stuff's still happening. So for her, what she went through and all that she did, we were just talking, doing one of our rehearsals, she needs to be on the $20 bill or on some form of the money. And why isn't there someone of color on our money? And it's 2023. We're still not woke. We slept.
Have you thought about creating a Ida B. Wells journalism scholarship at IU for black women, black history?
No, we haven't.
It's a thought.
I'll get with you. Get your wallet
It
out.
only takes $25,000.
Yeah.
Well, with all these open sources of funds now, what do you call them? Grant, no, not grants, but.
Go fund yourself.
GoFundMe, so-
We can pass
There's ways to do it that the world.
So what did you learn, Annie?
Yes. I would say if Ida B. Wells can have the strength and bravery to do what she did back then, we can all have the strength now to even do a fraction of that advocacy work. Because her strength was clearly just immense. So we all can do a little bit, right?
I learned that I had no idea what these three women were about. I'd heard of Ida B. Wells, but it's sort of a name that just kind of was up there, But then to hear the art and the literature and the journalism and the work and the communicative skills that went into their careers, it's just, I had no idea. So I learned.
I think with each one of these plays that oh, sorry. Tired of talking like this. I think with each one of these plays that I have done with these three women, I have lamented my education. The way that we talk about U.S. history, and it is very plain. It is also repetitive. Out of 12 years of being in public school system, you should learn a bit more. You know, you shouldn't like have to retell George Washington and go like, oh, you know, the cherry tree that chopped down, oh, that's the lie, but you know, we'll talk about him being the president, and then that just kind of carries through your 12 years. You can have a very rich understanding of American history and not have to have this overwhelming, oh, wow, if you decide to go to college and someone and a professor says, hey, by the way, here's all the other stuff that you didn't, that you weren't told, and let me fill in the gaps, because as true as it is that this person was doing this and being able to excel, this is why these people were not being able to excel, or here are people excelling despite the things that are in their way. Last night we had someone that, it was a little off-putting, I'm gonna just say it right now. It was a little off-putting to see a person that I perceived to be a little bit older than my sister ask the cast, or ask these two women, if black papers actually existed, separate papers for the black community actually existed. And I did my best to not go, are you serious? Of course there was.
Never heard of Frederick Douglass, I guess.
Look, and we went into Frederick Douglass after that because I think two scholars in the back were like, ooh, let me talk about this. But it hurts my heart to know that we are almost conditioned not to question, and then we get settled into that. And you have to come to a play to understand your actual history. You know, it's a little off-putting, but I'm blessed to be with these three women over here. And to the first question, how do I not get too emotional? My director pulled me back very quickly and was like, if you get lost in this moment, you can't go to the next moment. So great direction tells you don't give it all, because you still have somewhere to go.
You raised a lot of points, and you know, the worst thing that can happen to a storyteller is you work real hard, develop a story, tell it once, and it dies. Where do you take this from here?
They have a series.
Yeah. Remarkable
We do put
women.
on a series.
This is righting the wrongs. Next, it's going to be skating through town. I don't know. What's next, girls?
We haven't settled on the next, we have a show coming up in November, and we have not settled yet on what we're going to do for that show. As far as what will happen with this particular show, it depends. It depends on a lot of things.
Well, I was thinking immediately that once you're done with this performance, you don't want to put the cover on it and let the dust settle. You want to maybe film it, get it out to more audiences or something.
There's a possibility we could do it in Indianapolis, but that hasn't been confirmed, and we're not even in talks with that.
We're pushing you in that direction.
One quick follow-up, and this is the last question, two-parter. The Voodoo Prophecy article, was that a real writing? And secondly,
Absolutely.
a suggestion for the next title is We Are the 11th.
Oh, okay. The 11 that said no.
That's good.
Wow, that would be great.
Yeah.
I know we had a couple of questions too in the back as well. I think I saw a hand raised.
It's me. I want to thank you for putting this on. How do you, getting into those characters, how do you, and experiencing their trauma, how do you get back out of that? How do you, you know, the lights turn on and you take the makeup off and you've got to live your life? How do you prepare for that? Because what you're doing is traumatic, I think.
Well, you know, we have each other, and during the rehearsals, sometimes we get off track of the rehearsal itself, and we have conversations. And what has definitely helped all of us, we have a great director. And that's just the bottom line. She's awesome. And so, and we can talk about everything, even when we don't have the other people with us. Resilience Productions, we're really close. Really, we've bonded. We love each other. We respect each other. And so we can have conversations, and then the people that our director chooses to participate in our plays, she's good at choosing people, and we just bond, and we could have those conversations, tough conversations that America can't deal with. We can deal with it, and that helps us with the aftermath. And then we got loving families to go home to too. That helps.
We also have to have these conversations to, especially to give these two characters, these two people, permission to be in their character. And for them to know that I see you as yourself and not your character. To give them permission to do that and to be in that. It's incredibly helpful to do that, to separate that. And personally, I stay up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix. Demon Slayer is my thing right now. So
And
that's
this
how I
is
wind
art.
down.
This is art.
This is art.
You know, this is art. And as an artist, you separate art from real life. And I'm an actress when I step on that stage and I'm acting a part. And so I don't take that, I don't take that home with me.
We're not Daniel Day-Lewis.
There's enough on TV that I have to deal with. I don't need to take this character home with me.
I have a question. This is about have they compensated any of the families of the lynch victims or anything? Great question.
No. But what we did find out is that the Moss family, Ida B. Wells' friends, they moved to Indianapolis. They did leave the South. I'm not sure why they think Indianapolis would be any better. I grew up in segregation in Indianapolis, but they did move.
What was the date of the last Indiana lynching? In Marion, Indiana.
1934.
I think it was 53.
The Marion lynching was 1931.
You sure?
That was
And I don't think they were compensated. I don't think any, how many, what was the number, 900?
Oh, 959.
Yeah.
Those are documented.
Yeah.
Those are documented, yes.
Yeah, and we did have lynchings in Indiana and downtown Indianapolis. That's documented.
And the Klan was very cozy right here. Yeah. We did a play, when was that? A couple of, 3 years ago?
18.
The Klan marched into the church,
Second Baptist Church.
Second Baptist Church.
right here. And, yeah, it's amazing.
African Americans have not been compensated for anything, but other groups have. We haven't.
German families were compensated after World War II.
Everybody, Japanese, yeah, everybody but us.
I do want to also give any more folks in the back too on this side too, if you have any questions.
How many of you think Glass looks good in gray hair?
Me! I told her that. Yes. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I told her, with her red dress and that hairdo, she looked like a Christmas ornament.
Well, I will thank you again all for joining us. Feel free, if you'd like to have individual conversations as well, you're more than welcome to. But I hope you have a wonderful evening and safe travels home.